So I'm going to tell you something that isn't taught within your biomedical engineering degree. It's funny how you see people all around you, biomedical engineers, working within the same exact environment, with the same exact degree that you have, but somehow they are favored by the VPs. Somehow they are the project leads, and somehow they win every single room, every single product demonstration, every single project they lead, and every single raise that they ask for. They aren't the smartest biomedical engineers in the room, because the smartest biomedical engineers in the room almost never win the actual room itself. The biomedical engineer who wins the room does 6 specific things, or there are 6 specific patterns that separate biomedical engineers who get promoted and win every single room from the biomedical engineers who get stuck. So the premise of today's presentation is as follows. Technical excellence gets you into the room. It gets you into the building. It gets you the actual job. But it doesn't get you the actual room. It doesn't guarantee that you own the actual room, and it doesn't guarantee that you work perfectly and you succeed within the actual job. The biomedical engineers with the highest GPAs, the biomedical engineers who have the best technical minds, and the biomedical engineers who have the most rigorous analysis skills possible, they don't really own the actual rooms that they are in. And someone else, another biomedical engineer who isn't as competent, isn't as smart, didn't have the highest GPA, actually gets the promotion, gets to lead the project, and gets the offer that every single person wants. And today we're going to be talking about the patterns, the 6 specific thinking patterns and strategies that actually explain why this happens and how you can basically use these 6 behaviors in your favor. So before you click off this presentation and be like, this is political and this is manipulation and this is a video about being anti-technical and so on and so forth, I'd like to tell you that technical skills are extremely loved. Who doesn't love someone who has a bunch of technical skills? Because technical skills actually get you hired. So being technically competent as a biomedical engineer is very important. But having specific skills and behaviors actually decides what happens after you enter the actual workplace. So technical skills are obviously amazing, they are needed, but they need to be coupled with something else in order for you to be able to own a single room. So nothing here involves dishonesty, flattery, or any part or type of office politics. Technical skills are excellent and they matter, they are necessary, but they aren't sufficient. What this video is talking about, we're going to be talking about 6 specific patterns that are observed in every single biomedical engineer who advances faster than every single equally talented peer. This isn't theory. We're going to be breaking down behaviors that you can start practicing this week after you end this video presentation. The goal isn't to play the game of biomedical engineering, it is to stop losing a game that you didn't know was being played. So these are the 6 patterns, and kindly don't panic at all. We're going to be explaining every single one of them in full detail. So you're going to have a bunch of time for you to be able to take your notes and to write. These are the 6 patterns that we have, and the biomedical engineers who win do all of them or act within all of these behaviors. Pattern number 1 that decides whether you're a competent biomedical winner or whether you are a loser or a stagnant biomedical engineer is that you should volunteer for ambiguous work, which is what we like to call the unclaimed territory type of work, where careers actually accelerate, and we'll know why. Habit number 2 for biomedical engineers that actually win is that they make their boss look smart. They don't flatter and kiss ass, obviously. It is basically being strategically aligned to your actual superior. Habit number 3 is that they build cross-functional relationships with other departments and divisions. So they build a network that nobody teaches you how to build. Habit number 4, which is extremely important and one of the most important, which is they are able to translate their technical skills into a commercial language that is able to open doors, because VPs and every single higher up will be able to relate, because most of these higher up C-suite executives aren't very technical, they are more into commercial language. So being able to translate technical into commercial is what wins VPs over. Habit number 5 is that they claim credit without claiming credit. So they are extremely subtle, so they are visible, but without self-promoting and without a lot of boasting. And finally, habit number 6 is that they optimize for compounding visibility. So they basically have a lot of different small wins every single day that bundle up and create a little or a huge compounding effect, which beats one very big visible achievement. So without further ado, let's go into the actual habits one by one. Pattern number 1, or habit number 1, or behavior number 1 is that every single biomedical engineering winner volunteers for ambiguous, unwanted work. When nobody knows who owns that specific work, nobody wants it. And the winners actually walk in and take all of the credit and they perform that ambiguous work. Most biomedical engineers will also look at this ambiguous work and they will be like, there is no defined success criteria, so I can't prove my return on investment for doing this ambiguous work and no one will be able to notice. What the winner sees is that there is an undefined scope. So you get to define the scope and you get to define the standard of your work by how you perform this ambiguous work. And the other thing is that, and this is something that every single biomedical engineer falls into or has fallen into, they'll be like, this isn't in my job description, this ambiguous work, then it is not my problem, I'm not going to do it. What the actual competent biomedical engineer does is that they basically start doing this work by building relationships with different departments. So they don't sit there and say, this is outside of my scope, this isn't in my job description, and this isn't my problem, I don't want to communicate with different teams, and so on and so forth. What they do is that they build relationships with other departments and teams in order for them to be able to solve this work. And this is when we come to point number 4, which is basically building a cross-functional relationship. So they have people in every single department and in every single place within the company that actually respect them and get to know them. And then the final point is that normal biomedical engineers might be like, no one asked me to do this work, then why should I step in? I could just stay comfortable. But what the competent biomedical engineer says is that this is high visibility. Why is this ambiguous work high visibility? Why is the leadership noticing and focusing on this specific bit of ambiguous work? It is because no one really wants to do it. So the competent biomedical engineer, the winner who actually steps in and does the filing that no one wants to actually do and services the medical device that no one wants to touch and basically files a claim that no one wants to do or talks to different departments that no one has the mental capacity and energy for, this specific leader, which is, for example, a VP, a higher up C-suite executive, or whomever they are, they will notice the specific biomedical winner that went ahead and took the time out of his day to perform this ambiguous work. Pattern number 2 is that they make their boss look smart. They don't flatter, and it isn't about playing a politics game within the actual company. It is just being strategically aligned to your actual boss's vision so that it compounds in both directions, which is your boss's direction and then your direction as well. So picture this little scenario with me. Your manager presents something to the VP of the actual company which you're in. The deck has 3 technical claims that you have actually wrote yourself. 2 of the 3 technical claims are imprecise, which is basically a fault of the manager because they're basically presenting imprecise information. And you know every single nuance when it comes to these 2 imprecisely written and documented claims that are about to be presented. You have 2 options within the actual meeting. Option A, you can correct your manager in the meeting in front of the VP, thereby demonstrating your expertise to everyone. Option number 2 is that you can brief your manager privately beforehand so that they can correct the actual nuances and they can correct the claims, and it looks like the corrections have actually come from them within the scope of your data which they are presenting. So which option would you choose? Would you go for A or would you go for option B? If you went for option A, I believe that you are mistaken, because option A will make you look smart once and it will lose the trust of your manager forever. because you have basically thrown them under the bus, even though it was their mistake. But remember, they are your higher up. But option B, on the other hand, makes your boss look smart every single time. And hence why they remember who have actually helped them become smart, which is you. So they always keep you beside them and around them. And this is actually how you are trusted to be promoted, because you never let your boss be surprised by you actually telling him that these are imprecise in front of the VP, and then you basically have this whole argument, and then you appear smart once. You have actually decided to be a grown-up about it, and you have actually briefed your boss in private, and they have actually made the nuances. And don't forget that it is still your slide deck which is being presented. So now you gained the trust of your boss, and you will most definitely get the promotion. Pattern number 3 out of the 6 behavioral patterns that every single biomedical engineering winner does that all of their peers aren't able to do is that they have the ability to build cross-functional relationships. So they build a network of different individuals and different departments in order for them to be able to own a lot of the territory around them. So they build relationships with the regulatory affairs department, because the regulatory affairs department, by the way, decide the submission strategy. So they help you with your actual submission strategy. They also build relationships with clinical affairs people, or the clinical affairs department, because this specific department own the data that is going to justify your design as a biomedical engineer. They also build relationships with manufacturing and operations departments, because these departments actually build what you design as a biomedical engineer. They also build relationships with quality and the compliance department, because these review everything that you are going to basically be building and putting forth. And finally, they build relationships with commercial and marketing departments, because these will sell what you have built. Your technical network keeps you current as a biomedical engineer, but your cross-functional network, which is this network, and actually building your cross-functional network, which is something that no biomedical engineer really wants to do because it's a lot of work, will keep you relevant for years upon years upon years to come. And this second one, which is building your cross-functional network, is what decides who leads within the actual company, and that would be you if you implement this third pattern over here. Pattern number 4, which is extremely important. Every single competent biomedical engineer that has a winner mentality always is able to translate technical expertise into commercial terms in order for them to be able to be understood by every single higher up within the company. So instead of only being technical and having someone else communicate your technical abilities to the higher ups, you are actually technical and you understand how to communicate to the higher ups. So you speak the technical language and you are able to translate it into a language that the higher ups can actually understand. So you have the same exact information, which is this over here, the technicalities, what an engineer would say, but you basically switch it over into completely different language, which is what the business itself and the higher ups within the business, the C-suites, actually need to hear. And this is how you get respected, and this is how you get promoted. So let's look at a couple of different examples. For example, the engineer, the technical engineer, might say something like, we have reduced signal noise by 12 decibels, for example, or dBs. This is not something that a C-suite or a higher up or someone within the commercial space is going to hear and understand and be excited about. If you are able to understand the technical nuances, and then you can say something, for example, like, we will have fewer false alarms, so nurses will be able to trust the actual monitors again. This is a skill that needs to be learned, and it's a bit nuanced, but if you are able to do it, then you are able to become a link between all of the technical people within the actual company and all of the higher ups within the company, and this is how you get promoted. For example, let's look at a different way of saying something else. The algorithm converges in 3 iterations. You can say something like, diagnosis happens in under 2 seconds, which means faster clinical decisions. I met ICE 6601 EMC requirements. Extremely difficult for any higher up to be able to understand or make use of. You can say something like, we have passed all safety standards with 0 regulatory risk. And I hope that you get the point. Always be able to translate your technical deep knowledge into something that any manager procurement officer, surgeon, or a higher up within your actual organization is able to understand. This is what gets you promoted. Behavioral pattern number 5 for every single biomedical engineer who is competent and who exceeds every single person and who wins every single room that they are in is that they are able to claim credit without actually claiming the credit. So they are visible without being visible. They are visible without self-promoting. They are visible without boasting. And let's look at how this actually works. Let's look at 2 different approaches. The approach that if you take as a biomedical engineer will backfire, and let's look at the approach that if you take as a biomedical engineer will actually compound and pay you dividends upon dividends upon dividends for the years to come. The approach that backfires is as follows. You say something in front of every person, such as, I did the analysis that saved the project myself. You might say something like, forwarding your work with FYI, see my contribution within the work. And you might tell people what you did in broad daylight. So this will be perceived as self-interested, and you will look like a vain, overconfident, cocky individual. The approach that compounds for years upon years to come, which basically makes you claim credit without actually claiming the credit, is as follows. You can say something like, so instead of saying I did the analysis that saved the project all by myself, you can say something like, here's the analysis, guys, this might be useful for the next phase. The work always speaks for itself, especially if you're not being too pushy, because people will see who actually did the work. So you don't have to really speak about it. But obviously moving later on, when we move into a specific slide, as you will see, the work doesn't always speak for itself, but in most cases, not saying that you have done the work will obviously make you shine even brighter. Something else, for example, is basically sharing the work as an entire team resource and not as a highlight reel, which is basically highlighting your contributions and making it clear to look at your contributions. Something else is being able to frame group outcomes with your contribution actually woven in without really showcasing it. And then instead of telling people what you do and what you did all the time, you can basically just show them what you have built, and you can actually genuinely ask for their opinions so they will draw conclusions. This will be perceived as generous and high performing, and this is where you want to be as a biomedical engineer. The person who talks about their work is tolerated, but you don't want to be this person who is just tolerated. You want to be the person who does work that actually speaks for itself, and this is how you get trusted within BME circles. And the final behavioral pattern in order for you to become a winner and a killer as a biomedical engineer is that you need to be able to optimize for compounding visibility. Don't take the single project path or approach, actually go for the compounding approach when it comes to your work. You don't optimize for a single big win, you optimize for very many small little wins that compound every single day over and over and stack over time until you get a steady upward curve trajectory that looks like this, instead of getting a little spike with a major deliverable for 6 months, and then you have months of invisible work down ahead, and then you have little moments of recognition, and then you're back into the invisible phase for the next cycle. Be someone who actually has weekly visible micro contributions that actually compound. Be someone that has status updates and KPIs that always show momentum into the upwards trajectory. Be someone who has relationships with cross-functional teams, and be someone who is consistently present in the leadership's field of vision, and that is by taking the steady upward curve trajectory, which is basically many small individual contributions that stack over time, which is the compounding path, and not the single project path. And always remember that the biomedical engineer who does one brilliant thing a year is actually forgotten. The biomedical engineer, the winner, the killer, who is consistently visible every single week, is the person who is never forgotten. So now we have talked about every single one of these 6 behavioral tactics and patterns, but there is something which makes them even more powerful. It is the ability, in order for you to be able to stack 2 different patterns on top of each other in a single move, and this is how you accelerate faster than the person practicing each one of the 6 patterns separately. So let's look at compounding and multiplying and adding these patterns in 3 different examples over here. The first example is you can volunteer for ambiguous work, which was one of the patterns that crosses different departments, which was basically another pattern. So for example, crossing departments, which is pattern number 3, and then ambiguous work, which is pattern number 1. So you volunteer for ambiguous work which crosses different departments. You have actually added pattern number 1 and 3 together, and this is basically how we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It is 2 patterns with 1 single move. Another example is you can present a technical win without over exaggerating your ego and being like, look at my work and see my contribution, in a commercial language. So you are basically claiming credit without claiming credit, which is number 5, and you are translating technical into commercial. So you are adding pattern number 4 and pattern number 5 together with 1 single sentence, and then you frame it as a team outcome. So you will look senior and you will also look generous at the same time. 2 different patterns, 1 single sentence. And finally, you can brief your manager before the presentation, which is what we talked about, which is you make your boss look smart and then you use their actual language with your actual data, and they will succeed and you will be indispensable to them. So this is how you basically have a compounding effect between these patterns, and this is how you multiply every single pattern in order for you to be able to accelerate a lot faster than the person who is practicing every one of the patterns on their own. So now this is all fun and we have understood and we have looked at every single pattern and how they compound and so on and so forth. So now, why does no one practice these patterns? Why is it that only the top 1% of biomedical engineers all across the globe are able to use these 6 behavioral patterns and even multiply and compound all of these patterns together? Why doesn't every single biomedical engineer use these patterns? It is because these patterns are invisible. And why is that? It is because biomedical engineers always think that technical skill is king, and technical skill is visible within their work, but these patterns aren't visible when it comes to their work. You cannot really gauge or measure you making your boss feel respected or feel superior. You cannot really measure how you can basically claim credit without claiming credit. You cannot really measure the little small wins that compound over time. You aren't really able to measure how you translate technical knowledge into clinical text and ability, and you cannot measure how the C-suite executives actually think about it. So most biomedical engineers mistake these patterns as if they don't have any effect on the outcomes, but unfortunately these patterns affect every single outcome, and most engineers never connect the two and are never able to connect the two. Biomedical engineering training rewards individuals for their technical excellence, for their solo problem solving and for the right answers, but no specific biomedical program maps how organizations actually promote biomedical engineers. It is not always down to the technical skills, it is down to psychological and different behavioral skills, which are basically the 6 that we have talked about. Also, most biomedical engineers believe that the best work speaks for itself, but unfortunately it doesn't. The work actually speaks when someone translates it, positions it, and makes it visible to the right people. And this is when it comes to claiming credit without actually claiming credit, and being able to translate technical into commercial so that someone is able to translate it, position it, understand it, and make it visible. And finally, by the time every single biomedical engineer realizes that these patterns matter, they would have spent a 3 to 5 year period where they have actually had someone else have a 3 to 5 year period head start over them. So be sure to know that every single one of these behavioral skills will compound and will give you a head start over time. And finally, know that these patterns are invisible because sometimes they might look like they are personality and they are politics and they are manipulation, when in reality they aren't. They are strategy. So now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that every single one of these patterns might be fake, and you might think that they don't feel noble and that you're going to self-sabotage yourself and so on and so forth. But let me tell you that any single and every single one of these 6 patterns don't sound fake and aren't really fake. Don't think that because you were trained to believe that the work should speak for itself, that because you were trained to believe that being self-promotional is unprofessional, and that because you were trained to believe that making your own boss look good is flattery, that these patterns actually sound fake. In the biomedical engineer, in the winner biomedical engineer's mind, these 6 patterns aren't really manipulation, because making your boss look smart, making your boss look more competent will actually make the team succeed, and thereby everyone will be able to benefit. Volunteering for any ambiguity and any ambiguous work will create value for yourself where none existed, and this is how you show leadership and ownership. Translating technical ability and all of the technical details which you have into commercial sentences and into the commercial language is the highest form of communication within biomedical engineering, and it isn't dishonesty at all. Making visible work is actually a professional responsibility, and you're not self-promoting, because you're not pushing and shoving into people's faces work that isn't well done. You are showing people something which you have done, and you have actually fulfilled all of the work from all of its angles, and you are basically asking for what they think about it. And always remember that every single biomedical engineering senior that you look up to is actually doing all of these 6 patterns. They just make it look natural. So this is the 90-day starter stack in order for you to be able to apply all of these patterns. So what you do is, in week 1, you find one ambiguous project that nobody wants to do. You raise your hand, you take ownership, you take leadership, and you actually define the scope of the project, and you send a single page plan to your higher up or to your manager. This is how you show ownership, and this is how you show initiative, and this is how your manager actually sees you, and this is an actual I, for example. And during the first month before your next leadership meeting, if your slide deck is going to be discussed and presented by your manager, be sure to brief him privately on one specific insight and give them the actual talking points and how they should actually maneuver around your slide deck and how they should actually talk when explaining the actual slide deck. Let them use it, and don't be shy. Let them use it and let them take all of the credit. They will remember you again. In month number 2, have a coffee or some Teams calls with some different cross-functional people within different departments, such as people in regulatory, clinical, or commercial, and do this regularly. And don't talk about your actual project and responsibilities. Be sure to understand their projects, their responsibilities, and their roles. And this is how you build human to human interactions and relationships. And finally, within the 3rd month, make one piece of your work visible every single week, whether it's a status update to your higher up, a shared analysis to your team, or a brief to another cross-functional team from your relationships that you have built. And always be sure to track your progress, because we want to lean more towards the compounding upwards curve and trajectory, and hence why consistency always beats you pulling off one single project or one special move a year. Always aim for the compounding trajectory and curve. So the takeaway from today's presentation is as follows. Always know that the smartest biomedical engineers in the room will rarely win the actual room. They rarely own the actual room, and they rarely win the hearts of every single person in the room. They rarely get the actual promotion. They never get what they want. And this isn't to say that basically being smart as a biomedical engineer is a bad thing. It is actually extremely important, but you need to be smart and visible at the same time. You need to be technically excellent, and you need to be visible and emotionally intelligent, and you need to have some behavioral patterns installed in order for you to be able to pay the price of advancing within your biomedical engineering career, and hence why we have presented the 6 patterns that you have seen today. And finally, as a final thought to close off today's presentation, always know that the biomedical engineers who get promoted aren't really smarter than you. They have just learned 6 specific patterns that we have talked about today, and you were never taught these patterns, and they have just started earlier than you. So now you have these 6 patterns in mind, and these biomedical engineers who actually get promoted just have a 3 to 5 year head start on you. The only thing that they have is the head start. So now you can start practicing these patterns every single day, and that head start will shrink because you are practicing day by day. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you adopt every single one of these patterns. I hope you understand them fully, and I hope that you start practicing immediately as soon as this video is done. Take out a piece of paper, write all of these patterns, and be sure to practice them every single day, and come back to this video after a long journey if YouTube is still around, and let me know how these patterns have helped, if they have, which I'm sure they will. I wish you nothing but the best, and I'll see you in the next one.